Okay, so should we rock and roll? You ready to start? Ready to watch a little 10-minute video of the linguistic genius of babies? They're like little sponges. All right, so um, when when I'm getting yeah. When we watch the video, think about the seven theories, six theories of language creation, and see if there's a way that we could draw a relationship between this lecture on the linguistic genius of babies and those theories of language creation. Um, we'll surely be able to draw some connections to that list of myths about language, arguable points about language. Hmm.
Do something.
Hey, can you bring me a piece of paper? Two pieces, please.
I needed a piece of paper too.
All right. You all ready? Yeah. Okay. So here we go. This is Patricia Cool and the linguistic genius of babies, and we want to think about those and why we've created language, and also um, we could think which discourse that James Paul G discusses. All right.
I want you to take a look at this baby. What you're drawn to are her eyes and the skin you love to touch. But today I'm going to talk to you about something you can't see. What's going on up in that little brain of hers? Tools of neuroscience are demonstrating to us that what's going on up there is nothing short of rocket science. And what we're learning is going to shed some light on what the Romantic writers and poets described as the celestial openness of the child's mind. What we see here is a mother in India, and she's speaking Koro, which is a newly discovered language. What this mother and the 800 people who speak Koro in the world understand that to preserve this language, they need to speak it to the babies. And therein lies a critical puzzle. Why is it that you can't preserve a language by speaking to you and I, to the adults? Well, it's got to do with your brain. What we see here is that language has a critical period for learning. The way to read this slide is to look at your age on the horizontal axis. You've done that. And you'll see on the vertical your skill at acquiring a second language. The babies and children are geniuses until they turn 7, and then there's a systematic decline. After puberty, we fall off the map. No scientists dispute this curve, but laboratories all over the world are trying to figure out why it works this way. Work in my lab is focused on the first critical period in development, and that is the period in which babies try to master which sounds are used in their language. We think by studying how the sounds are learned, we'll have a model for the rest of language, and perhaps for critical periods that may exist in childhood for social, emotional, and cognitive development. So we've been studying the babies using a technique that we're using all over the world in the sounds of all parents' lap, and we train them to turn their heads when a sound changes, like from the appropriate time. The black box lights up and a panda bear pounds a drum. A 6-monther adores the task. What have we learned? Well, babies all over the world are what I like to describe as citizens of the world. They can discriminate all the sounds of all languages, no matter what country we're testing and what language we're using. And that's remarkable because you and I can't do that. We're culture-bound listeners. We can discriminate the sounds of our own language, but not those of foreign languages. So the question arises, when do those citizens of the world turn into the language-bound listeners that we are? And the answer? Before their first birthdays. What you see here is performance on that head turn task for babies tested in Tokyo and in the United States, here in Seattle, as they listen to ra and la, sounds important to English but not to Japanese. So at 6 to 8 months, the babies are totally equivalent. 2 months later, something incredible occurs. The babies in the United States are getting a lot better. Babies in Japan are getting a lot worse, but both of those groups of babies are preparing for exactly the language that they're going to learn. So the question is, what's happening during this critical 2-month period? This is the critical period for sound development, but what's going on up there? So there are 2 things going on. The first is that the babies are listening intently to us, and they're taking statistics as they listen to us talk. They're taking statistics. So listen to 2 mothers speaking motherese, the universal language we use when we talk to kids, first in English and then in Japanese.
I love your big blue eyes. So pretty and nice. うわー、大きな茶色いお目目。そして綺麗な黒い髪。
During the production of speech, when babies listen, what they're doing is taking statistics on the language that they hear. And those distributions grow. And what we've learned is that babies are sensitive to the statistics. English are very, very different. English has a lot of R's and L's, the distribution shows. And the distribution of Japanese is totally different, where we see a group of intermediate sounds, which is known as the Japanese R. So babies absorb the statistics of the language, and it changes their brains. It changes them from the citizens of the world to the culture-bound listeners that we are. But we as adults are no longer absorbing those statistics. We're governed by the representations in memory that were formed early in development. So what we're seeing here is changing our models of what the critical period is about. We're arguing from a mathematical standpoint that the learning of language material may slow down when our distributions stabilize. It's raising lots of questions about bilingual people. Bilinguals must keep 2 sets of statistics in mind at once and flip between them, one after the other, depending on who they're speaking to. So we asked ourselves, can the babies take statistics on a brand new language? And we tested this by exposing American babies who'd never heard a second language to Mandarin for the first time during the critical period. We knew that when monolinguals were tested in Taipei and Seattle on the Mandarin sounds, they showed the same pattern. 6 to 8 months, they're totally equivalent. 2 months later, something incredible happens. But the Taiwanese babies are getting better, not the American babies. What we did was expose American babies during this period to Mandarin. It was like having Mandarin relatives come and visit for a month and move into your house and talk to the babies for 12 sessions. Here's what it looked like in the laboratory.
发生了什么事情哦？小小熊七七在这里，一个绿色的圈圈，绿色的圈圈，绿色的圈圈，转一下，转一圈，嘿，一圈，再一次哦，转一二三。
So what have we done to their little brains? We had to run a control group to make sure that just coming into the laboratory didn't improve your Mandarin skills. So a group of babies came in and listened to English, and we can see from the graph that exposure to English didn't improve their Mandarin. But look what happened to the babies exposed to Mandarin for 12 sessions. They were as good as the babies in Taiwan who'd been listening for 10 and a half months. What it demonstrated is that babies take statistics on a new language. Whatever you put in front of them, they'll take statistics on. But we wondered what role the human being played. So we ran another group of babies in which the kids get the same dosage, the same 12 sessions, but over a television set. And another group of babies who had just audio exposure and looked at a teddy bear on the screen. What did we do to their brains? What you see here is the audio result, no learning whatsoever, and the video result, no learning whatsoever. It takes a human being for babies to take their statistics. The social brain is controlling when the babies are taking their statistics. We want to get inside the brain and see this thing happening as babies are in front of televisions as opposed to in front of human beings. Magnetoencephalography that allows us to do this. It looks like a hairdryer from Mars, but it's completely safe, completely non-invasive, and silent. We're looking at millimeter accuracy with regard to spatial and millisecond accuracy using 306 squids. These are superconducting quantum interference devices to pick up the magnetic fields that change as we do our thinking. We're the first in the world to record babies in an MEG machine while they are learning. So this is little Emma. She's a 6-monther, and she's listening to various languages in the earphones that are in her ears. You can see she can move around. We're tracking her head with little pellets in a cap, so she's free to move, completely unconstrained. It's a technical tour de force. What are we seeing? We're seeing the baby brain as the baby hears a word in her language. The auditory areas light up, and then subsequently areas surrounding it that we think are related to coherence, getting the brain coordinated with its different areas, and causality, one brain area causing another to activate. We are embarking on a grand and golden age of knowledge about the child's brain development. We're going to be able to see a child's brain as they experience an emotion, as they learn to speak and read, as they solve a math problem, as they have an idea. And we're going to be able to invent brain-based interventions for children who have difficulty learning. Just as the poets and writers described, we're going to be able to see, I think, that wondrous openness, utter and complete openness of the mind of a child. In investigating the child's brain, we're going to uncover deep truths about what it means to be human. And in the process, we may be able to help keep our own minds open to learning for our entire lives. Thank you.
How do I get out of there?
What is going on in this baby's mind? If you'd asked people this 30 years ago, most people, including psychologists, would have said that this baby was irrational.
So, yeah, so Dr. Hold conducted some research. This is maybe 20 years ago, and he was kind of that if people know more than one language, that they become more proficient language learners. And to kind of test that, he used translation and transcription and like grammar as a basis. And so I guess the basic results were that learning more than one language did not make people more effective or more correct language users. And so, in fact, it's like, well, kind of the funny line, I guess, was that, well, people can be in more than one language. So maybe you've heard before people saying, if you learn a language, your grammar will be better. But no, it's kind of like it could help you identify grammar, but it couldn't help you use it more effectively. So it's kind of interesting. And he also found in the research that sometimes, like, there are language groups where people have a prestige language. Like Mandarin is the Chinese for the people, but then there are other variants of the language that mark social standing or class or education. And he found, like, in those instances, the people in the study would often claim that they knew the prestige language, but like Hold had them, he's like, had them write like simple sentences and things in the languages they claimed they knew. And very often he found that people would claim they knew the prestige language when really they didn't, which is kind of funny, but it's what people do. But so tell me about this video and about Patricia Kuhl's message. What struck you as interesting, or what connections did you see with James Paul G or with Yule? What came to mind? What jumped out at you? Oh yeah, the human interaction, the two biological nervous systems are needed, like so we can watch, television, and it doesn't have an effect. Audio doesn't have an effect. What I'd be interested to know is, so when we wear like virtual reality headsets, we're immersed in an environment, and the brain often can't tell it's been immersed in that environment. So I wonder, so now, like, would virtual reality like change that, since it tricks the brain? Yeah, I don't know, but
what if it was like, well, yeah, kind of going back to you said with VR, like they showed a teddy bear talking, and then they showed just audio, and neither of those really worked. But what if it needs a human interaction, but does it have to be a human person? What if it was just like a simulation of a person thing? Would that be able to kind of sidestep that?
Droid, robot.
Or like maybe like a VR like program teaching you how to speak. Like it's talking about VR heads. This is like theoretical stuff, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think like someone said that the interaction is the key. Is probably like the give and the take, and so with part of it, the television couldn't respond in ways, so that was probably part of its shortcoming. But yeah, like people like they use virtual reality to help like stroke patients recover, because
Really?
when you have a stroke, it disrupts the channels and the pathways in the brain, and so part of teaching stroke patients to talk again and to regain motor skills in the brain so it can take different pathways, and so they found people are studying like how VR could help with that. But yeah, so maybe part of it is just on computing power, and if someone could create a simulation that's interactive and responsive. But yeah, I don't know.
Man, I was thinking about this, the interaction being a key component. I wrote that because it seems like if you're just listening, like you said, um, the speaking voice, you're just listening to audio or watching TV, they can't respond to anything that the baby does, any reactions or any sounds that the baby does. But even with VR, I think definitely you would see it go up on the scale, but our brains are so like gosh, it on such a minute level. Our brains are able to see just like the twitch of an eye or the tensing of a muscle, and I think even those very small like micro reactions help a baby like develop the semantics of a language. And I think that's probably not something that VR has yet, but I think maybe eventually, because language is, as we've discussed, it's not just syntax, it's not just grammar. It's there's that interaction that's a key part of it.
Oh yeah, for sure. And that maybe that is a great tie-in to James Paul G, because when he talks about or gaining entrance to a new language, we really can't learn a language or a discourse like in a classroom setting, in a laboratory setting, right? And so we need to go out and use the language in the wild in order to gain that usage proficiency. It's important. So there's that little connection there. Yeah, but well, what else? Um, so then like the babies are they're citizens of the world, right? Um, and so Cool says they're up until maybe 8 or 10 months. They're they're culture bound listeners, and then at 10 to 12 months they turn into to language bound listeners. Hmm. And that has like quite a few connections. Not quite a few. It's one large connection, right? Because he says the study of language and literacy is what should be ensconced in social interaction, and so that lends to the cultural bound listeners, right? So the society and culture have prominence over the language itself. There's that tie-in, and James Paul G isn't talking about babies, but he's talking about membership in the discourse communities. But I think there's something to be had there, that culture, wider interactions, not the language itself, is is impacting the way we learn languages. Hmm. So then, have any of you had any experiences where you just couldn't hear a sound that someone who speaks another language was saying?
I have one. I have cousins and coworkers that are Arabic, and they speak Turkish and Arabic around me. And I've been picking up words, and I can hear what they're saying now. But when I first started talking to them, there were certain things and sounds that I wasn't able to reproduce without actually like physically trying. And I researched it, and it said something like in anthropology, it's like 12 years amount of time before you lose an ability to say certain syllables in certain languages. And I thought that was an interesting thing. So it was really cool to, like, when after a while you started hearing the different like syllables that you never heard before.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, and there's a connection, to the Japanese versus English and the L and R sounds, and so then yeah, there's the sounds that we're not picking up. Um, I like to think about like empanadas, right, and how I totally say empanada like a white English speaker, while Spanish speakers might try to correct it, right? Like the DA at the end is really like a DTHA, empanada, right? It's a little bit different, but talk to a Spanish speaker and they'll say it to me and I'm like, I can't even hear it. I can't hear the difference. Because that's not a sound that I've been routinely, exposed to. But then I just say, I'm like, oh, that's Castilian Spanish. I'm talking about the Spanish of the Americas, not Spanish of the continent. Okay, does anyone have anything else that they'd like to say about this video before we move on? Paraguas. I had a so when I was a child, I had a speech impediment where I pronounce my R's like W's. It's called Roger Rabbit syndrome, and so I had a lot of speech therapy like in first grade, and I remember sitting there with the therapist and just going or first trying to do that, or she'd hold up the flashcards. It's like car, truck, or the R sound in there. But um, I know now that part of what the speech therapy like included was phonics, and so I have like sometimes I because I'll start phonetically pronouncing things, and it's wrong. In first grade, they learn the sight words, and a lot of don't follow regular phonetic rules sometimes. So yeah, so I catch myself. It's not just a lot; it's all the time seeing things phonetically rather than the way they ought to be pronounced. What's that cat? The sun in my eyes. So let's do this. You all have something to write with. Okay. So we'll give you like 2 minutes. So just write a list of the discourse communities that